أنت لك والملك لا شريك لك لبيك.
Okay. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. Welcome our dear viewers. Today we have a very special guest today. We have our Shaykha. She is, doing a lot of great work in the Twin Cities, and she is very much qualified. I know it's not good to praise somebody in front of them, especially people that have studied ilm and knowledge. But I just want to express our gratitude and that we have such an asset in our community. May Allah bless Dr. Shaykha Aisha Wazwaz and all the work that she's doing. So without further ado, Doctor, how are you doing today?
Very good. Alhamdulillah. Allah barik fiku, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ikhlas, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also accept the deeds that we do, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also make us from those that have better deen and better akhlaq in their private moments as well, and make us from those that hear and know what is good and actually implement it in their life. Allahumma ameen.
Allahumma ameen. Allahumma ameen. So let's just get right into it. This here, I was thinking about this for a while, and I couldn't think of anyone else better to do this interview and this podcast with concerning women and sister issues today, especially in countries that are not, governed by any sort of Islamic traditions and culture. Is quite the opposite. We live in this country, America, and then sometimes there may be a shortcoming from the ulama here, whether they be Western educated or over abroad. There may not be access, there may be barriers due to language and whatnot, that sometimes the sisters don't have, that sort of those resources, or sometimes they do have it, but no one is advising them. So we want to clarify some masail that are connected with sisters today, and we're just going to get into these series of questions, and there's a lot of them. So we're probably going to, inshallah, hopefully do a second one that's a lot more prepared, and inshallah ta'ala. So the first one that I have for you, Dr. Aisha was concerning our sisters is, what's the issue with women wearing perfume? Is it something that's a total prohibition in public, or is it something that is that they can wear just a little bit? Or talk to us about that.
So the Prophet ﷺ actually made it clear, and there were a number of different hadith really in that regards. In one of them, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari narrated that the Prophet ﷺ actually said, أيما امرأة استعطرت فمرت على قوم ليجدوا من ريحها فهي زانية. That the Prophet ﷺ actually said in the hadith that any woman that passes by a group of men, in other words, her intention was to wear perfume in order to basically amuse others, or etc., then in that situation that she would have actually practiced a form of zina. And when we're talking about zina, we're actually speaking about different levels of zina, or different levels of trying to amuse the other person. So in that situation, the Prophet ﷺ had actually made it clear that any form of beautification, whether that involved an actual beautification that she is putting, whether we're talking about foundation to remove the flaws, or whether we're talking about a garment itself actually containing beautification, or whether it involved a smell of beauty, or even, what amazes me is the ayah in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا يَضْرِبْنَ بِأَرْجُلِهِنَّ لِيُعْلَمَ يَخْفِينَ مِنْ زِينَتِهِنَّ. And even though, like, if you look at the ayah, that they should not actually strike with their feet in order to draw the attention about their beauty. But if you actually get an idea, they're actually walking, and it was common that they used to actually wear some kind of bangles or anklets that were making like bell and ringing sound.
Yeah.
And they were doing it in order to draw the attention of guys. But the ayah was actually saying that لِيُعْلَمَ مَا يُخْفِينَ, what they're concealing of their beauty. In other words, were the guys actually seeing them? The guys weren't actually seeing them. They were hearing the sound of the beauty. And this is really strange. You know, the ayah forbid even the sound of their beauty to be heard by the men, even though they couldn't even really see them. But even the sound of beauty, the smell of the beauty, the actual beauty, all that in Islam is considering that it is part of a woman's deen to conceal her beauty in order to keep that tazkiyah in place. So whether it's the sound, whether it's the smell, or whether it's the actual beautification, all that is to be concealed, whether it was her legs or feet striking, or whether it was her own voice, and where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually forbid even for a woman's voice. And where he said فلا تخضعن بالقول فيطمع الذي في قلبه مرض فلا يخضعن بالقول فيطمع الذي في قلبه. So الخضوع بالقول in general is also part of that, in where even if it's her own voice فلا تخضعن بالقول فيطمع الذي في قلبه مرض وقلنا قولا معروفا. Go ahead.
MashaAllah. So then there's, like I said, we have a lot of questions. Jazakallah khairan for the answer. But I want to put like 3-4 questions all together, just so for the sake of time. So we have today, it's a modern phenomena today, and this is something that I didn't see 10 years ago, you know, with our sisters. But you have these nails, these long nails that are fake, synthetic nails, and you know they go to the salon and they get their nails done, and then the lipstick, and then now you're having piercings. Okay, so nails, lipstick, piercing. Please, what is the hukum for that?
So there, you know, when we actually talk about, when we're talking about beautification, whether we're talking about, you know, nose piercings and whatever they call that, bull piercing and nails and all that, there is a common thing which is extremely important. You got to pay attention, because this is related to Aqīdah. This is not only related to you know, in a person's behavior and a person's actions, and this is something that a lot of different people that answer the question as if it is related to behavior, halal, haram, actually got it wrong.
Okay.
Why? Because this is an issue of wala and bara.
SubhanAllah.
This is an issue of wala wal bara. This is not an issue of, you know, the hukum related to people's actions. Why? Because when you actually look at this ayah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Iblis, all right, shaitan, he said, وَلَا أُضِلَّنَّهُمْ وَلَا أُمَنِّيَنَّهُمْ وَلَا آمُرَنَّهُمْ فَلْيُبَتِّكُنَّ أَذَانَ الْأَنْعَامِ وَلَا آمُرَنَّهُمْ فَلَا يُغَيِّرُنَّ خَلْقَ اللَّهِ. This is Iblis actually saying that he will order them to change the creation, change and even the creation of the different animals, and even change the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the ayah says, وَمَن يَتَّخِذِ الشَّيْطَانَ وَلِيًّا مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. Now, if you look at the word مَن يَتَّخِذِ الشَّيْطَانَ وَلِيًّا, this is not talking about just what is the ruling in terms of behavior. This is not an issue of fiqh only. But this is actually talking about wala. This is talking about, who do you consider yourself taking the authority of who? Why is Shaitan actually saying that he's going to order people to change their appearances and change all that? Because that is the way to get onto the inside. In order to change your fitrah, he needs to actually alter you from the outside. Why is altering from the outside related to the fitrah? Because when he changes the outside, you start getting a feeling of a sense of belonging to a certain group, to a certain jama'ah. You get a sense of belonging. Your wala becomes to a certain idea, to a certain behavior, to a certain group, and then this belonging becomes really in where man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa minhum. Whoever the Prophet ﷺ says imitates any group, then he is part of them. Al-Qari actually said what that means is that if you imitate, whether we're talking about al-kuffar, whether we're talking about the disbelievers, or whether we're talking about al-fasaq, even if it's a bad Muslim, or al-fujjar, etc., then you're actually part of them. So what does that actually have to do with any of this? This is actually telling you that this is an issue of wala and bara, because if we're if your love is not for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if your wala is to someone else, then this is a major issue of aqeedah, that who do you actually feel a part of? Look at this. The Prophet ﷺ actually said, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يكون هواه تبعا لما جئت به. You would not be a believer until حتى يكون هواه. What is الهوى? الهوى is what you adore. الهوى is what you feel a part of. If you feel a part of something else, another group of people, then you're actually going to be part of these people. So that's why the Prophet ﷺ was saying, you would not actually be a believer unless your hawa, your desires, what you adore, what you enjoy, is actually going incongruent, in parallel with what the Prophet ﷺ had actually come with. And that's why أوثق عرى الإيمان الحب في الله والبغض في الله. The strongest bond in any relationship, in faith itself, is actually loving and hating for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we're talking about, of course, this is something as women, they're created within this fitrah of wanting to draw attractiveness and etc. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually orders women, especially, that we gotta be careful when it comes to that fitrah part. There is something that you are more susceptible to, so you gotta be careful, which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasized, whether on their voices, on their garments, etc., because it is part of our own instinct that we want to draw attention. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was emphasizing those points. Why does a woman, for example, pray even when there aren't any men around, but she has to pray fully covered? Even though there aren't any men around there, she could be alone in her own room. Well, that's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually wanting a certain tazkiyah for her to focus just on her heart, not focus on anything else. Focus just on the inside.
That's a beautiful answer. And you hit it from a lot of different angles, and answered other questions that I had as well. But no, yeah, this is very important. I think one thing that we've neglected a lot as a Muslim community, especially in the Western world, is the inside, the tazkiyah and tazkiyah to nufus. So I'm 100% with you on that. You did kind of.
Let me just add one thing, Usman. The Western culture is so emphasized on appearance. And then there's this, in the postmodern times, there's this emphasis to create a narrative that the reason why I'm emphasizing on my appearance, or why I'm emphasizing on certain things, is in order to tell you who I am. When in reality, what you are telling me is that you're really empty. If focusing on the color of your hair, or the piercing, or to wear these, different things, is to you is, I'm basically trying to lay out a narrative. The narrative is really one clear thing, is that you are living in a ball of contradiction, a ball of paradoxical views where you're confused about your own identity. And that's the age of postmodernism. It's a confusion about one's identity. So then they'll focus on the outside because the inside is already empty. Because the inside is already empty. So that's why they'll focus on the outside, trying to put in so many different things. It's a piercing here, and it's a looking like an animal there, and it's another color there, and it's trying to make up an identity that doesn't even exist. It's the identity of confusion, an identity of paradox, an identity that is a ball of all the contradictions, in where it's just focusing on the outside. But Islam tells you, wait a minute, don't just take things because this is the common culture. Islam wants you to focus on the inside. Look into your heart. Every time, even when you look into the mirror, Ya Allah, beautify my heart as if the way you had beautified my creation, my
Mm.
looks, my appearance, even though the person could not necessarily be the most beautiful, the most handsome. But that's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted you to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you in the best of the creation. Focus on your akhlaq.
SubhanAllah.
Focus on the inside.
SubhanAllah. Jazakallah khairan, Shaykha. Which brings me to the next point, or the next question here. There's increasingly a lot of more sisters now, especially in the Twin Cities, are wearing niqabs, okay? Or the satr of the wajh, so for the sisters. And some may be doing it for COVID guidelines, and some may be doing it for, the actual trying to get closer to Allah Azza wa Jal. So then there may not be any education on their part on what the niqab and the conditions of the niqab are. So I want to ask you something specifically, because I see this a lot, is that you'll see a sister who wears a face covering, or she wears a niqab, and then she has like either kuhl, or she may have like makeup here. Is that something that is okay to do?
Well, in general, I really like the tafsir for Ibn Atiyah. Tafsir Ibn Atiyah, he emphasized one thing that you don't actually find in a lot of the tafsir. And he actually said in the tafsir al-ayah, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا. So what does it mean to not reveal the general zina? What is zina? Zina is different than zina, because zina is relating to beautification. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbid that women would reveal their beautification. إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا. So what is إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا? Is it necessarily, what appears on the outside, or is it that? And Ibn Atiyah actually differentiated between what is acquired zina and what is original beauty.
Okay.
So let's say, if we're talking about originally beautiful, okay, and regarded that إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا is regarding something that she's not putting in. Because he regarded that if you are adding any type of zina, whether you're adding eyelashes with your niqab, even if it's without a niqab, regardless, all right, regardless of whether there's a niqab or not. So in general, the beautification is something you're not supposed to be adding onto your hijab. It contradicts your hijab, whether you're wearing niqab or whether you're not wearing a niqab. So to think that, oh, I'm covering the face, but I'm putting eyelashes, or I'm putting, I don't know, this the all that makeup that right now, you can make 70-year-old become like a 20-year-old all of a sudden with all this makeup and foundation, and you start wondering what would just happen right there. So in that situation, this is actually contradicting hijab. Hijab, or the covering, whether it's a niqab or a hijab, all right, meaning the head covering, or the general hijab, all right, that's actually contradicting. To add any beautification or draw attention or to emphasize some type of a look and beauty, whatever she's wearing underneath or even outside or even on the outside, it's at the end of the day, if you are trying to draw attention, or if you are trying to enhance beauty to a certain particular area, that actually contradicts hijab, period.
Okay.
The whole idea, the whole concept of hijab is that you're not bringing in that attention.
Okay.
The attention for guys, so that they would understand this woman is a bashful woman. This woman is considerate of her akhlaq. If I want to step to this woman, that there are the methods in whether I go to her family or I approach in the halal way, because this woman regards her values on top of any other desire, period. This woman is a woman of value. This woman is very strong and steadfast on her value.
No.
But the second that she's got a hijab on and she's putting all these lashes and these long fingernails, this woman is confused about her own value.
SubhanAllah.
She's confused about her own value. The whole thing is to let yourself and others know that you're a woman that takes your values seriously. But if you're confused about your values, there's some homework to do. Let's say it that way.
Okay. And then would you also call it as a like khiyana, deception, on the women's part? Because then there may be, of course she's not supposed to have a sort of certain interaction with non-mahram men, but if she's out in the public and then let's say she attracts a guy and then he's maybe like trying to marry her or something, and then finds out she doesn't look like that really. And so would you also say that this was a deception? This is like a deception.
There's no doubt about that it's a deception. That's a form of deception if he finds out and discovers that all this was actually plastic surgery and fillers and Botox and all that stuff, and then he comes across that, oh, she has to actually do this every 6 months and I have to pay for this and etc. And that's definitely a form of deception.
SubhanAllah. Okay, next question. So I heard this a couple of times here, and this idea that a brother and sister can go to a local, for example, local coffee shop and speak about marriage without a mahram or without a wali there, because it's a public scene. Do you think this is something that is a correct, at least in our environment, which is a non-Muslim environment? Would you see this as being permissible?
So it's not permissible because the Prophet ﷺ actually said, that any man and woman that would join together and without having a mahram, the shaitan is going to be there. This is not only speaking about, all right, in a closed area only. So there can be a khalwa, an actual khalwa. What is an actual khalwa? An actual khalwa in where she and he knows that they are alone in this area and that they can take all their privacy. There is an khalwa hukman. So what does that mean? Technically, they are in khalwa. So for example, they're in this restaurant and they know that they can just leave this restaurant together and that no one would stop them. In other words, they don't find the inner haraj. They don't find that there's any responsibility or find it odd that they would just leave together. So in other words, the fitna is there for anyone to say that. And it's really sad to know that there were some that claimed such a fatwa that it's not khalwa because they're actually together in a coffee shop or in a restaurant. This is absolutely wrong. This is absolutely wrong. They are in khalwa even if they are in a coffee shop. They are in a khalwa even if they are in a restaurant. Since there is no one to actually guide or mentor this setting, it's considered a khalwa.
Would you also say that this applies in a Muslim country as well?
Regardless, Muslim country or non-Muslim country, the hukm shari doesn't change here depending on the country. This is hukm shari. Any man or woman, they're together. They have a sense that they're basically comfortable. They can do whatever they want. They can, without regarding certain guidelines of how this actually goes. There is no mahram, her brother's not there, etc. Then that is actually leading to one straight fitna right there. And I've seen this happen many, many, many times.
Okay. And that's a great reminder. I've heard it with female or sister speakers around the city say similar things. Wallahu musta'an. And
unfortunately, I must admit, I know many sisters are going to be offended when they would hear me say this, but it's really sad to admit that we have a lot less sisters that are qualified to give fatwa and to even answer questions on Islam than brothers. This is not being misogynist whatsoever, but this is actually something that I would see very often, in where even Islamic organizations, they want to seem like they are inviting sisters, being inclusive to the sisters, and inclusive to the sisters, and at many times invite people that are not necessarily specialized, people that are not necessarily qualified to speak on behalf of Islam, but we just want to seem inclusive. Even if we invite somebody that's not necessarily qualified, we'll just invite a sister in there. That's one problem. The second problem is that many times people confuse ilm with rhetoric, speech, and counseling. There's a difference. There's a difference between al-maw'idha, and when you're able to speak to the heart and speak, to bring people, draw them to Islam, in between al-ahkam al-shar'iyya that is based on fiqh, that is based on Quran, Sunnah. And we're not talking about the general Quran and the general ayat and the general Sunnah. We're actually talking about the ability, the qualification to read, to understand, to go to the books of hadith, to go to the books of fiqh, to go to the books of tafsir, to the actual wording, not the translation. There's a huge difference. And we're seeing this very often, unfortunately, in where the reality is, I know many women are going to be offended, and I know that for a fact that many will be offended. What did you just say? I'm like, yes, I will say it again and again. الحق حق. There's no muhabah. الحق حق. There's no muhabah. It's not an issue of being a misogynist or a feminist. There are certain things that you have to say it as is. We lack qualification, and it's really important to also mention this problem, not because I'm hating women or etc. No, we see it very often that in the women's area there is lack of qualification, and at many times they're given certain advantages not because of their qualification, but because of business. Because we want to bring in viewers, we want to bring in proselytize an idea that we're inclusive, and then we actually create another problem here. We're creating another problem by selling our deen. Because if you're going to give the person that's not qualified to speak, you're selling your deen. Simple as that.
No, Jazakallah khairan. This is a great point and advice for all of us, wallahi. Where we're living in times of deception. Sadawatun khadda'at, wallahi.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, so which my next question actually sort of ties into this is explain to us, okay, there's a lot, social media has exploded within the past decade. And there's a lot of people doing a lot of things, saying a lot of things. What would you say in terms of the sisters that are on social media and they're given advice, they're making videos, would you say that this is an issue of how they conduct themselves while they do it, or they shouldn't do that at all? Meaning being in the public eye where, hundreds of thousands of, non-mahram men, people who fi qalbihim marad, possible, are looking at them, interacting with them. Would you say that social media is a place where a sister who wants to give advice, and there's many who do it, for they have good intentions. Do you think it's a place for a sister to be in, to do that type of work, or they shouldn't have a social media or be interacting in social media at all?
There are actually a number of different points here. Number one is that when we actually look at what the social media right now is needing, I'm not saying for the sisters, don't speak unless you have an Islamic studies degree, but I would say know where your scope is at. If you're not specialized in fiqh, you're not specialized in Islamic studies, all right, then know where your scope is. Your scope is. That's one part. Whether we're talking about sisters or brothers, it's the same thing. Number one, if you are specialized, let's say in counseling, psychology, then you have to learn the ahkam al-shar'iyya, the Islamic rulings that pertain and relate to your area of or field of study. If you are a specialized in business, then you have to learn the Islamic financing relating to that.
No.
So, and you take it from there. That's one side. So in other words, we're talking about the ilm. Number two, we're talking about the way things are presented. Now, when we look at the way the things are presented, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يا نساء النبي لستن كأحد من النساء إن اتقيتن فلا تخضعن بالقول فيطمع الذي في قلبه مرض وقلن قولا معروفا. Yes, the discourse, al-khitab, was to the Prophet ﷺ's wives, but all the scholars agreed that this adab is something that even the mu'minat should actually be learning from. لستن كأحد من النساء. You're not like any other woman. In other words, don't necessarily consider that because something is a custom or a tradition, because everyone else is doing it, that you could just do it. You have another mission. You have another level. The way you judge the right and wrong is not based on what everyone else is doing. Not because people are complimenting on a certain for example page and they're getting so many views. Islam doesn't use that type of social currency and the compliment to prove or to consider something acceptable or not.
No.
And it's really sad to admit, just on a side, footnote number one is that you've got even Islamic organizations that will also do the same. That they might actually invite a speaker because she or he may have a lot of followers, even though they know they're not specialized.
Yep.
And I've even confronted, for example, Ikna, and I said, hey, why are you inviting Linda Sarsour, for example? She's got a lot of followers, but you know that the ideas that she's carrying and she's coming with contradict the actual ethics and the actual morality of what you're trying to portray as a Muslim organization.
No.
Yeah, but she brings us the views. What you are doing is that you're proselytizing and you're marketing and you're confusing the youth that are attending by telling them this is your role model. This is your role model. This is what we want you to be. This is what we want you to do. And here's this person that's basically speaking in that way. And whether we're talking about akhlaq, whether we're talking about activism, whether we're talking about even ideas, abortion, etc., they're even giving the fatwa on in these regards. So let's continue. فَلَا تَخْضَعْنَ بِالْقَوْلِ. Do not be lenient. Now, الخضوع بالقول can actually be a number of different things. الخضوع بالقول can be one, in where the actual voice, she's being lenient in that. Two, الخضوع بالقول can be in where she's not engaging in serious talk. So she's chatting with this guy, etc. This is actually خضوع بالقول. فيطمع الذي في قلبه مرض. Why is this haram? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says فيطمع الذي في قلبه مرض. If not only, so here's the thing, is that not necessarily if you think that he's not going to have some kind of, let's call it, wrong intention in the conversation. It doesn't mean that, oh, I know he doesn't have the wrong intention. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you the hikmah behind it.
Yeah.
But you don't really know how this person relates to this. وَقُلْنَا قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. So what do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَقُلْنَا قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. So say what is good. What is good? That's too much of a very comprehensive word. So قُلْنَا قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا, in where one, it is supposed to be based on ilm. Two, it is supposed to be based on the way that you speak it. So in other words, you can't be, revealing yourself and saying, well, I'm actually doing القول المعروف. You can't be here joking and doing that al-khudu' bil-qawl, where she's joking and she's making funny things and etc. And because that's al-khudu' bil-qawl. You have to be serious. You got to make sure that even your followers, that there are men following, that you got to make sure that you are actually taken seriously and that no one is going to misunderstand that your stance is actually of a serious woman that is abiding by the values and the values of Islam and the akhlaq of Islam. So once you're getting these messages of guys transgressing their limits, well, that's actually telling you that you're doing something wrong.
Okay.
Simple as that.
So
You're once these guys are sending you messages and trying to hey abayo or whatever it is, girl, you've got something wrong right here. Why did they transgress their limit? The only reason why they transgressed their limit is because they saw in you some messages that you were willing to hold some form of conversation.
So you may, after hearing that, totally understand what you're saying. Some people may say already, I hear the voices in my head. They're saying, oh, well, you're not holding the men accountable, Dr. Aisha Wazwaz. You're only, talking about the women, and you're blaming the women for something that, you should also hold the men accountable for.
So let me tell you one thing, is that when I talk to women, we're going to have a whole different conversation. If I were to talk to men, there's going to be a different conversation. Whenever you have two people, you cannot just tell every single person to go right or left. For the person that's on the left, I have to tell them to go right. And for the person that's on the left, I have to tell them to go right. Well, you understand what I mean? All right. And that's the same thing. When I'm talking to the women, and because I'm specialized and most of my lectures are really directed at women, so that's why we're going to be talking this way. But for guys, if there were guys here, I would say, listen, it definitely doesn't give you the permission to actually say, well, it's the women's fault that they're actually doing this. No, it's not. You've got a certain responsibility, and they have a certain responsibility. So when I'm talking about when we're talking about women here, then we'll say, well, here's the responsibility, and where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was directing the talk and telling, Ya nisa an-nabi, oh, the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, لَسْتُنَّ كَأَحَدٍ مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ. He was talking to the women. You're not like any other woman. In ittaqaytun, why didn't he say, oh, let's talk to the guys? Listen, when you see my wives, the Prophet ﷺ's wives, just stay back, and we don't want you getting whatsoever in any conversation. There's certain talk that must be directed at women and certain talk that must be directed at men. The feminist type of rhetoric is making a lot of women, I would say, including, sorry to say this, but including the many that are riding the boat of female scholars, actually taking in, and I would say indoctrinated by the feminist rhetoric. What do I mean by the feminist rhetoric? That it's really holding a sword against every single man. The feminist rhetoric holds men responsible for each and every single thing. And then it becomes that, no, we're going to fight the men for this. We're going to fight. Wallahi, the feminist rhetoric, it is actually willing, wallahi, to fight the Quran. Just like Amina Wadud, to fight the Quran. Just like Amina Wadud, in where she called Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam a deadbeat, astaghfirullah. That's the same thing. If we don't lay out the boundaries, and actually understand, the other day I actually put a post up, and the post was actually saying that women are more susceptible to fitna, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet ﷺ was giving more emphasis in ordering women, just like when he was actually during the Eid, and he was telling them that he had seen the women, more women in hellfire than men, and that, ladies, because you are more susceptible to fitna, you have to take that in consideration, take that seriously, and learn your deen. Wow. I had women contact me. This type of rhetoric is going to keep women away from Islam. This is making a fitna. This is not me speaking. When the Prophet ﷺ even said about the Dajjal, and he said that the first of the followers are going to be from the Yahud and from the Nisa and from the women. You want to call the Prophet ﷺ a misogynist as well? You're going to call the Prophet ﷺ also not not embracing women. And it's this is really dangerous. It's not me speaking. There, you know, Ibn al-Arabi, when he talked about Abu Hanifa in regards to a mas'ala in zakah, he said, أما أبو حنيفة, as for Abu Hanifa, فقد جعل القرآن مرآته فأبصر الحق. He let the Quran be his lens. Even though Ibn al-Arabi was Maliki madhab, he said he was able to see al-haq when he made the Quran be the lens. And that's the same thing. You want to see al-haq, use the Quran and Sunnah as your lens. Don't use the feminist rhetoric in where it's waging the war and the battle on men and the battle on their own bodies even. In other words, they're not just waging a battle on men, but even on their own bodies. If you're going to wage a body on your own self and the body around the people around you and a body and everything, well, you're going to kill yourself. You're committing suicide.
No.
Committing suicide, literally committing suicide. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, be careful. This type of rhetoric that may be surrounding you could actually be really taking you for hatfa nafsik, to your own suicide. If we're not aware and we don't review the rhetoric in that speech that's around us that is manipulating us, indoctrinating us, and it's infiltrating our minds and without us recognizing it, even when we're seeing many that are, given the podiums and the microphones to speak. My word, sisters, especially since my words, I mainly work with sisters. Do طلب العلم. Wallahi, the sanawat khadda'at, the years of deception. Wallahi, you would not be able to be protected from them unless you go back to reading Quran and Sunnah and you understand that as your first thing. Because wallahi, the deception, the years of deception, you would get a college degree, PhDs. Wallahi, a lot of it is PhDs. Wallahi, in deception, a lot of it.
SubhanAllah.
Wallahi, a lot of it. They are called psychologists. They are called who knows what, therapists and all these different things. And when they don't recognize that these departments were literally, a lot of these departments, wallahi, hijacked by feminists and hijacked by atheists and hijacked by postmodernists and hijacked by liberals and hijacked by the LGBT. If they don't recognize it, they will just think that this is science and study.
No.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِيَّتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ وَمَا تَهْوَى الْأَنفُسُ وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُم مِّن رَّبِّهُمُ الْهُدَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us not only about the idolaters and the idol worship, إِيَّتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ, they will follow speculation. Or إِيَّتَّبِعُونَ وَمَا تَهْوَى الْأَنفُسُ. تهوى الأنفس, just their own whims. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُم مِّن رَّبِّهُمُ الْهُدَى. In order to be able to tell the difference between deception or /dhann and hawa, which is right now what the LGBT and all those different lobbies are actually doing, liberals and all these different things. And it's so sad to see that most of the active Muslims are actually riding the boat of the DNC, not recognizing that they are actually just advancing, wallahi, liberals and LGBT, and they would think that I'm just being active in order to support the Muslim cause.
SubhanAllah.
What are you supporting? You're supporting al-hawa.
SubhanAllah.
And then, وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُم مِّن رَّبِّهِمُ الْهُدَى. If you don't know how to maintain your identity by supporting al-wahi, by supporting what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent, then to actually think that by supporting the so-called studies, when in reality they are nothing but indoctrinated agendas, then you're really following deception. And then, yes, I will really, and then say it again and again, we are more susceptible to fitna, not only now, but more than ever before in history. Wallahi, more than ever before in history, especially with social media. Wallahi, if the Dajjal were to come out right now, wallahi al-azim, not only just in 40 days, wallahi, in just a couple hours, you will see people in large numbers. Allah yarhamna brahimtu. Allah yarhamna brahimtu. We are really in sanawat khadda'at, where just a trend, even if it's so painful, tongue piercing, and all these, and wallahi, looking like a bull and putting I'm sorry, but all this is combining even your nasal discharge. Why are you putting, how on earth is it beautiful to actually put a ring or whatever they call it in your nose? It's collecting, I'm sorry, but it's collecting all the nasal discharge. How do you do your wudu? How do you clean your nose? What if you wanted to wipe your nose? How is that even beauty? Well, how is that even beauty? But that's the same thing, is that we're seeing women. It's like, oh, it's a trend and we'll do it. It's a trend and we'll do it. This is really scary. سنوات خداعات, and it's Allah al-Musta'an. Allah yarhamna برحمته. I know many will probably think that I'm being too harsh, but if we don't lay out the vertebra of your wala and bara for Islam, wallahi, you will be not only living a sanawat al-khada'at, but you're deceiving yourself.
No.
We have to lay things straight, clear, with no gray areas. And I think that's a lot of the fatwa, and we're giving things gray areas. Don't worry, if there's a gray area, القول المختلف فيه, I'll say it straightforward. This is مسألة خلافية, and I'll say it straightforward. I don't have a problem with that. مسألة خلافية, and I'll say it straightforward. But when we're talking about things that really relate to الولاء والبراء, I'll just say, hey, wake up. This relates to your iman, to your aqeedah. This is not relating to halal, haram. Don't deceive yourself. Are you really right there actually living your belonging, your sense of belonging, your sense of wala to the mu'mineen or to the kafirin? That's why Tahir ibn Ashur said a very important thing. Tahir ibn Ashur, regarding to the hadith, in where the Prophet ﷺ, and he was talking about, the women that braid their teeth and all these different things, that the tattooing and braiding their teeth and all that. Now Tahir ibn Ashur said, in explaining this hadith, he said, this is not only relating to the action itself, but this is actually relating to a certain practice that was done by these deviant women. And the hadith is telling the women that if this is a common practice that you want to associate yourself with, then this is a mas'ala not limited, and this is really important, that it's not limited to al-washm or tattooing or al-washr to teeth or doing the eyebrows. This is not limited to it. And this is Tahir ibn Ashur, Rahib. He's a Tunisian scholar, Rahib. It extends to any single practice where it is a common practice that is done by deviant women in order to let other men know that they are available or they are a trend.
Okay.
It relates to any practice, whether that practice meant a ring in the nose, or whatever it's called, or whether it meant a certain practice, or whether it meant to put the hijab in a certain way, or whether, in the end, is that it will be included in it.
SubhanAllah.
And this is from al-fiqh Tahir ibn Ashur. Rahib, this scholar, great scholar. His book Tahrir with Tanweer is one of the best of tafsir. Sorry, I got carried away.
No, it's okay. No, we need, like, you answered a whole lot of other questions too. Alhamdulillah. So, I 100% agree with you. These are issues of aqa'id. This is way past, and it transcends fiqh in and of itself. So some of these issues definitely need a finer eye to look at. Now, my next question for you is, tell us about women traveling as groups, like to Umrah, but just all women, no men, just all women. They're traveling and they're going to Umrah. They're coming from, let's say, for example, Minneapolis. They're going all the way. Is that something that is permissible for a group of women to travel? Right.
This is actually relating to fiqh. There is a considerable opinion for Shafi'iyya in where they said if it's a if it's a group of women and there is a fitna that they are aminin, etc.,
Yes.
that they can actually do that. We're talking about a group, we're not talking about a group of 3 or 4, but we're talking about something like 10, 20, 30.
Okay.
And there was a man, it depends. And when we're talking about this qawl fiqhi from the madhab Shafi'i, it is a considerable opinion in situations where this is not going to France and go look at the Eiffel
Okay.
Tower. But this is not talking about that. When the Shafi'iyah regarded that, they regarded it for things like Hajj, for Umrah, and in other words, for travel, for ibadah, not for siyaha. So this is not
Okay.
for tourism, but this is for ibadah, or this is for talab al-ilm. So we're getting a group of, let's say, 30 girls or 20 girls actually going for ibadah together, or talab al-ilm together. That's when they regard it. So not siyaha. They're trying to avoid as much as they can to avoid areas of fitna. So they're just going for particular things. So they set it for talab al-ilm, or even for ibadah, not for siyaha.
Okay. That makes sense.
Siyaha, which means tourism.
Right. That makes sense. This next question is, there is a notion right now that is running wild on social media, and I'm gonna have to say the person's name who I seen the clip of is Nu'man Ali Khan, where he says that the wealth of the husband belongs to the wife, and the wife's wealth belongs to the wife. So sisters now really, and I've heard many, even I have conversations with them, my students sometimes, and they say like, yeah, that's like, yeah, it's our money, and so the husband's money is their money, and their money is their money, right?
No, the wealth, no. So the wife's wealth, all right, the wife's wealth doesn't necessarily belong to the wife. So there's a difference between her own wealth and between an income that she makes.
Oh, okay.
There's a difference. So this is actually 2 segments. Okay. So the husband, the wife's wealth, if she actually had that wealth before she got married, that is hers and hers alone.
Okay.
Hers and hers alone. So for the wealth, like I said, the wealth that she had before marriage, that is hers and hers alone. Or whether she got this as within that culture, that's hers. So for example, in certain cultures, she gets Eid money, for example, or she gets gift money. That is hers and hers alone. That's her own independent wealth.
Okay.
That's one thing. Number 2 is that for the income that she makes, it's very common that we would hear the dua saying, it's her, that it's hers, and the man cannot have whatsoever any part of that money. Fiqhiyan, that is not accurate.
Ooh.
It's not accurate. There are actually 7 differences of opinions regarding this mas'ala in terms of the woman's income. And it's really said that many times the dua, when they want to speak about women's rights and etc., sometimes I would say they're not specialized in fiqh, and they would say rhetorical speech, let me say it that way. There are actually almost seven differences of opinions on whether does she actually invest one whole, in other words, all of her money within the household. So let's say she gets an 8-hour job, and let's just assume she's making $4,000. Does she have to invest all the $4,000 within the household? Since, hey, it's your income, it's just like the man is supposed to be investing $4,000, then you would have to invest $4,000. Or is it half? Or is it none? Or is it 1/3? Or is it 2/3? Or is it, according to the Hanafis, it's basically what they agreed upon. Wow. So they would agree on between the scholars. Now, the most controversy is really within the Maliki madhab, in where you've got differences of opinions within the Maliki madhab itself. So is there any text that actually gives me any particular number? There is really none. There is no text to give me one particular number, and which is really based on al-ma'ruf urfan kal-mashruti shartan. It's actually based on al-urf. It's based on what they would agree on or culture or etc. But there's no particular text that actually said how much she invests. And to even say that she would basically take all the money and basically not have to invest anything is also a place of really needs nazar. It really needs revision, which is the Hanbali madhab. Because if she's going to be leaving 8 hours, so let's speak about justice here. If she's going to be leaving 8 hours, all right, and she's going to be coming back, oh, this is my money, and he's leaving for 8 hours as well, and that's, oh no, that you have to spend on the household, you have to pay the rent, and you have to pay all the expenses, and where and why did this problem actually come about? Where did the discussion actually start? The discussion really started most of it was in the 4th, 5th century Hijrah. That discussion, and the main reason for the controversy and the whole debate here was really because of how the scholars defined marriage. And this is something to, when they actually defined marriage, they actually defined it as it is the permissibility of a man finding pleasure in a human female. The reason why they defined it that way is because they wanted to canonize what we actually mean by marriage. And if this actually, just even from that ta'rif, from that definition, this actually brought in another problem, which is, does a woman actually have to serve her husband?
Okay.
Does she have to clean and fix in the household or not? This brought in another problem. And that's the thing, is that if you're going to confine yourself in a definition like that, and then you want to take it from there, well, that's not even a ta'rif Qur'ani. That's not even a definition that comes from Qur'an. They canonized it and took it from that base, and then started, okay, well, we're going to use this definition, and we're going to base all our canonization and how we legalize and how we regulate the husband and wife relations based on that definition. So for those that actually want to say that, the wife's wealth actually, or the husband's wealth belongs to her, are you going to accept that definition too? Are you also going to consider that, yes, based on that definition, you're going to say, I'm not gonna be obligated to work within the household, and I don't have to cook and I don't have to clean? You're going to accept that definition, and you're going to say, okay, well, let's accept that definition, and let's accept that you also don't have that right as well. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it gets messy.
It gets complicated. Well, freedom goes both ways.
No.
It goes both ways. If you want to say that, oh, I don't want to work within the household and I want the money to myself, well, then I'm going to tell you, oh, you're going to take also that the husband doesn't have to pay for your health care too? Because definition of marriage was, that it's basically you're going to take that too? You see, it goes back. It goes back, and it's really sad that many times people are taking in rhetoric and don't really go back to where did the conversation really begin. So let's go back to that part of it, where the wealth of the wife belongs to the wife and the wealth of the husband belongs to the wife. That's actually not true. The wealth of the husband belongs to the wife is absolutely not true, because that's why the Prophet ﷺ actually said in the hadith that the woman is actually حفظها لنفسها or حفظها لماله, that she guards his wealth. The hadith, لماله, she guards his wealth. What was it called? It was called his wealth. It wasn't called her wealth. In fact, that she would not do sadaqah without his idhn. Wow. She would not bring anybody inside his home without his idhn, without his permission. So to actually say that, that's absolutely wrong. And it's really sad. Maybe, I don't know the context of what he said it in. He probably said it in, just to joke around. And many times people don't recognize that when they joke around, if they don't actually base it in fiqh, then it becomes taken out of context, and
No.
it becomes something that people misunderstand, and then it becomes the trend that people don't actually take it back and trace it back to fiqh. So that's not accurate. The wife's wealth, we went into details, and the husband's wealth is not necessarily the wife's wealth. She has to take permission if she's using the husband's wealth to actually understand that that is his wealth and not hers to actually, misuse. At the end of the day, is that respecting not only wealth, but respecting also hudud. Hudud, respecting what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had regulated, respecting the boundaries is actually part of Islam. And that's what brings in the balance, even within the marriage, the husband and the wife, by respecting boundaries, respecting the deen, respecting health, respecting life, so we've got deen, nafs, aql, respecting mental health, respecting al-ird, chastity and family and privacy, and respecting al-mal. All that is to be respected, and all that is to be considered as the main vertebra of Islam and every single person's rights.
Jazakallah khairan, sister and Dr. Shaykha Aisha Wazwaz. You are very much appreciated, and this was awesome. I hope that the viewers have definitely benefited from this, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you and all your work. Brothers and sisters, follow the Shaykha, follow her on Instagram, on Facebook. Amazing lectures, PowerPoint presentations. This is something that we really need right now, and we should be supporting this type of effort, inshallah, from amongst us, brothers and sisters alike. Jazakumullah khairan. And that's all we have for today. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.